The cover that you just saw is a painting that in a series that I did about 4 or 5 years ago of the salt marsh at right down the road from my house here, and it captures a lot of what I'm trying to say in the book. Okay, first off, to start the book, my first chapter is what is God, and for purposes of this, God is just love. It's a vibration, and love to me is attention. But you can define it any way you wish. This is not really about God per se. And when you place your attention on anything, you are actively loving them. You are sending them a vibration. It's a frequency, and you'll hear a lot about frequencies here. So when you do that, you are being a spark of God and serving it in the greatest way possible. When providing this, more is generally more, conversely to most things. But anything that can be overdone, so you got to balance everything that you do. The quantum physicist that I mentioned earlier, Nissim Harriman, calls God the singularity. So I repeat that in this book, even though I commonly don't use that term. There's no attempt here to reinforce any established religion, nor to establish a spiritual path even though I have one. This book does not establish a sky god or a redeemer philosophy, and none is needed for any part of it to be understood or for you to use whatever's given here. Still, implement the techniques herein, enhance your chosen path by using them, and they are to be practiced at least once a day, I would say. At least 15 minutes in some sort of a contemplation or spiritual exercise, whatever you want to call it. So next, you hear this thing about God being love, and most religions define it that, but then they don't tell you what love is. So I go on to say, love is placing your attention on something other than yourself, but not necessarily. You can love yourself, of course, and all of it is important. Just dreaming is one kind of love. Dreaming is virtually the same thing as your awakened state. Once you get really onto it and you dream in the most advanced ways, there really is no separation. So the key here is that we are all spiritual beings on a spiritual path. All loving acts move us toward that love or God, as we say. Hate is often considered the opposite of love. Well, actually, hate can be love, and I give you an example of that in this book. One I came up with was when you see two people two teenagers courting, and you see how they can be this can be a contradiction. They virtually act as though they hate each other, but they are really giving each other love, and that's just one more of these kinds of contradictions that always occur spiritually. So feedback. You are always in a condition of constant feedback. That is one-way communication from God. While it may not be apparent, you actually do get back what you give. So love is always returned. And this love is quite significant. The wave may take years to occur, just as it may be instantaneous. The results can even take lifetimes, but it must return because that's the way love works. It's called balance, and some people call it karma, but it always happens. One method that I use is to measure feedback when it's known, when it can be known, and my method is I call dowsing. And what I do is I take this little rod here, and I have a pointer up on my screen in front of me, and when something's good, it points. When it's yes, it points that way, just like it's doing right now. And when it's negative, it goes that way. Now you might think I'm controlling that, and I was just then, but you'll find if you try it that you can get really good at that, and you can answer questions at virtually 100% level. Now this is really the same thing as muscle testing. You can go into Dr. Bruce Lipton's videos and watch him do it on people's arms when they hold their arms up in the air like this, and he pushes down on them and they resist. You can see Bruce finding out things about these people medically. Well, he can find out all kinds of things about them if he wanted to, or they would allow him, because you always have the ability to stop any of this if you wish. And that's what when I get into control. You are in control in certain ways, in every way, but you're never really in control of any situation, truly. And when you think you are, you're not. And that's one of my. If you're absolutely certain that you're in control, you're probably being a mentalist, and mentalists don't have control. They think they do. Modern physics and medical science, both, believe that when they have control mentally, they have control. It's just not the case. When you let go, and that's I know you've heard the term, everybody has, but when you let go and you surrender to God, if you will, the love, that's when you really have control. But if you try to control it, then it doesn't work. So it gets to be kind of funny, these contradictions. So right now, science in general commonly uses trial and error in all of their work. And trial and error is probably the least effective way to really learn, because they're not using any of their spiritual abilities when they do that. Now, creativity is a little different story, and you can't really do anything unless you're creative in certain ways. But if you rely on trial and error, and you rely on previously done work, you're not going to get it. It's just where it is. And that's why today our society is so far behind compared to what it was 10,000 years ago even, or early early Egyptian times. Trial and error was certainly used to some degree, but they didn't have books. I mean, they didn't have written books with paper. So they had to rely on what they were getting right then. And we just don't do that anymore. Now, some of the greatest scientists in the past, my favorite being Leonardo da Vinci, because he did so many things during the Renaissance. He was an architect, artist, an inventor, did the things I love. So have to put him on right at the top. And today, my man is Nissim Harriman, as I told you before. And what they were both doing was working with true creativity. And creativity never assumes that it has the final truth. It just works with what it has, and it goes on. And yeah, the more creative you get, the more you get. And it's the same thing with love. Now, I just told you about dowsing and muscle testing. I use them all the time for everything I do, because even if I have the work of somebody else right in front of me that's proven, supposedly, it's never proven. I have to test it. And one of the things that I do, one of the things that got me here was when we were working on our car device. I had to test every crystal that we had programmed and make sure that they all lined up plus and minus. Because if they were, one was backwards, the thing would only be 2/3 as good, and or 3/4 as good. So I got to be really good at that, and Dr. Price would go back and check my work, randomly to make sure that we got it right, because you never know, you can make a mistake, but virtually every time I got it right, and virtually every one of those CP4Us, as we call them, worked. If one was backwards, it wouldn't work as well. Well, I could have gotten a few backwards, I don't know. But apparently most of them were right the first time. And one of the guys that got us here was Dan Nelson. He is a quantum scientist. He's very far along in the field. I think he's maybe the best in the world in his field. But he uses fractals in healing. You can see him on the web. Just search Dan Nelson's water, or way back water, and you'll find him. He does use muscle testing on people in front of you. He also does muscle testing like this, where he holds his hands up like this. Now you watch him closely, because he's real good at it, and he can use that to determine if you have problems, medical problems, heart condition. He does that with one guy. You'll see him do it. But he relies on muscle testing just about as much as anybody I've ever seen, especially someone that's not into some of the advanced spiritual techniques that Rich and I are. I just wanted to let you know that nothing in the future is ever completely determined until it happens. I talk about this as established truths in the book, but you never get a complete future determined until it actually happens. That you as a spiritual being are one person that has influence on the future. All people together have an influence on the future. We all establish how the future is going to be determined by our creative abilities. So the more you go along physically or spiritually, the more you determine the outcome of future events. You become more of a determiner, if you will, a what's the word for it? You become God's will, if you will. Now God, again, I'm not calling God any particular thing, but you become a God person as you move up the spiritual ladder, if you will. Spiritual ladder being, some people are just further along than others, and even though society today likes to put us all in the same box, we are not in that box. So one of the things I want to bring up here, and I did in the book, is that bad things happen to everybody, and they have to, because if bad things didn't happen to you, you wouldn't learn. And you're here to learn, and that's just the way it is. So obviously bad things happen to me, and I don't get upset about it because I know that they're there for a reason, and everything happens for a reason. So I'm learning. We're all learning. So even people who have really negative outlooks and maybe want to kill a bunch of people or whatever, all of them influence this world, whether we like it or not. It's a soup. And one of the things I bring up is just how quickly this stuff can happen. It can happen in virtually minutes, and I've seen it occur. I can tell you that Rich and I are both, we've been around for quite a while spiritually. We've been members of our groups 40 years. Mine is Eckankar, his is Sri Michael Owen's group. He was in Eckankar for a long time. And the two of us together, when we get together and try to do something, not try to do something because you can't try. If you try, it doesn't work. If we let something happen, we ask to let it happen, and it happens. It can happen in a heartbeat. And what came to me just recently, I learned that, and I knew this, but I never really had it happen to me, is you can actually reverse events that have happened. You can turn something around that has occurred. Now, I heard about this, 30, 40 years ago. I heard a story about a guy that was driving his car, and he got into an accident, and he went into a spiritual exercise, and minutes later the car was driving down the road with him in it, and nothing had happened. Well, this is pretty strange. Obviously, not very many people experience this, but it does occur. And one of the things it can't do is you can't have a lot of people see this happen with you, because it would change their spiritual outlook and ways that would affect their futures, and it's just not allowed. So it's very rare, but I've seen it happen myself, and not very long ago it happened. So we don't violate that illusion. If we did, it would change the outlooks of people that are definitely on a spiritual path, that and just aren't learning their way along, and they might even go crazy. Who knows? I mean, crazy is not the right word, but this would affect them greatly, and we can't allow that to happen spiritually. For that reason, the further you get along on the path, the least you can tell. The more you tell, you got to really be careful how you tell it and what you say, because you can just mess up people's lives very badly, and you're responsible just like everybody else is. So what's prayer? And I mentioned that this is one of my titles. When you pray, especially if you do it creatively and you visualize along with it, you can actually make things happen. But the problem with prayer is that the person that's praying thinks that they are causing, that they know more than God does, apparently, or you couldn't do it. You wouldn't do it. So prayer, you ask for something, and it comes along, and you might just disrupt a lot of things and cause problems for yourself. So you really have to be careful about what you ask for, because you're liable to get it, and a lot of times you do get it, and that causes problems for you. So the best thing to do is to just visualize some nice stuff and allow it to happen, instead of trying to make it happen, because once you try to make something happen, the problems start. So that's visualization, and that's another title I have here. From a visualization standpoint, the most powerful tool that you possess is creative visualization. I say that in one of my sentences here I'm reading. So creative visualization, I do it every day. It's part of my job, as an architect. But you visualize what you're trying to do first. We all do it. You can't, if you couldn't visualize it first, nothing would ever happen. You have to visualize it first. And I used to teach school, architectural design, and the hardest part was to get people to sit down and actually visualize rather than trying to do a design. Because if you try to do a design, it will never happen, and you'll never be an architect or an artist or anything else. Musician, you have to sit down and you all play together, and it comes together. You ask any musician that does it, and he'll tell you how it works, but he doesn't know. It's very strange. So I mentioned this before, but problems are gifts from God. We don't ever see them that way, or most of us never see them that way. When you start to see them that way, you're grateful, because you just learned something that you couldn't get it any other way. Now, interestingly enough, and most people probably question what I'm saying here, but one of the reasons that this earth is such a great place to be is that we have a lot of problems here. when you go to the higher planes, the problems pretty much go away, and it's all up to you to be creative and make things happen. Well, that's a lot harder to do. It's a lot harder to do. You're not forced into anything. You have to be the person that's doing the creating, and it's like you are God, but you never are. You never become God. You're always working on that path, and there's always one more step ahead of you. So, the title of this book, What is Surrender? Now, everybody talks about surrender in Christianity, whatever religion. It's virtually letting go and letting God in, letting love in your heart. God's a creative force. We call it creative. It's really a lot more than that. But we say that God created heaven and earth and all that. But what really happened? I'm not. It's pretty deep. But it's a creative force, just like you're a creative force. So you're in a certain way, you are a small God, if you will, but being that. And the more you love, the more creative you get. That's just how it happens. So if you love your work, you become more of a creative force. You become more of a higher vibration. You work on higher levels. So that. And surrender is about letting your mind go, not trying to control anything. Now you notice, and the world's full of them, of mentalists, and these are the people that never rely on their creativity or their ability to create, their intuitive abilities. Most of the scientists in the world today, or quite a few of them, consider themselves agnostic, and that's because they are taught to be mentalists. That's what school teaches it for, at least lots of kinds of things that you take, like science and chemistry, whatever, physics. These things teach you to use your mind more and your creative ability less. So there's a lot of problems with our educational system today. I mean, how many times do you go into a class and have somebody say, "All right, this is how it's done now. What's a better way?" The next thing is that surrender isn't a weakness. There's nothing weak about surrendering and loving and being your true self. A lot of people are just the opposite. They try to control, and really, if you think about it, that is a weakness.